Hi there. Welcome to Productivi-Tree. I'm Santi Tacoronte, and I'm here to help you succeed and be happier. In each episode, we'll explore new ways to work smarter, manage your time better, and grow as a person. We'll share fresh ideas, find ways to improve, and help you become your best self at work, in life. Join me as we learn and grow together on Productivi-Tree. I have assessed over 500 executives on their productivity, and the top 10 all have something in common. They score high across 4 specific vectors: efficiency, effectiveness, ownership, and well-being. When these 4 align, you just don't lead better. You create compounding advantages that separate exceptional leaders from good ones. Take my 5-minute free assessment, and you will see exactly how you compare. Most leaders are shocked by what they discover. Find out where you stand at the link below. Neal Foard spent 3 decades at the top of the global advertising world, ranking among the top 10 most awarded creative directors on the planet for his work on Toyota and serving as worldwide director of creative learning for Saatchi Saatchi. He has built campaigns for Budweiser, Lexus, Sony, Amgen, and Major League Baseball. He has spoken at TEDx conferences and advised Fortune 500 companies, universities, and governments on creative messaging. Today, Neal runs Storyfire, an online training program teaching leaders and teams how to build trust, buying, and measurable results through storytelling. His short social media videos about the kindness of everyday people have earned him more than 500,000 followers. He calls it the conspiracy of kindness. And he's here to make that case that warmth is not soft and it's a hard business advantage. Neal Foard, thank you for being here with us in Productivi-Tree.
Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to meet you.
Neal, you have spent 30 years creating campaigns that move people into action. At what point did you realize that the emotional architecture of a great ad or a campaign and the emotion of a team were basically the same thing?
Well, first of all, can I point out, do your listeners know how many languages you speak?
Not sure about that. I rarely talk about me in this podcast.
Okay, well, the reason I'm pointing it out is just because the saying goes that when you learn a new language, you gain a new soul. And there's something I believe that is more elastic and adept in people that speak many languages. This is supported a little bit by evidence. They tend to be more empathetic because they have to code switch from one attitude towards another as the grammar and vocabulary changes. And what this brings me to talk about is the idea of the emotion behind our decisions. So what you discover from a long career in advertising is that people don't make decisions rationally. In fact, people are rather intensely logic resistant. This is on a display in the United States where the political divide can never be crossed because you can't bullet point somebody into changing their mind. You can come at them with evidence all day long, and they'll deny, and they hold their political beliefs as closely as their religious ones. Well, if you just accept the idea that most of our decisions are made emotionally, then if you're going to change someone's mind, you have to do it in the place they make their decisions. You're playing in the areas of emotion. You have to move people. Now, human beings, in terms of all the way from selfless people who will throw themselves on a hand grenade in order to save their squad mates, to the opposite end of the spectrum where you have literally psychopaths who feel nothing to kill another human being. Human beings distribute, most of us are in the middle. We're one standard deviation away from watching out for ourselves, but caring very much about the others around us. And given that this is where the bulk of people are, giving yourself the opportunity to appeal to other people emotionally reaches most people in a way that they like. There's a wonderful rule of business, which is life gets so much easier when people like you. And so to go out into the world in an attempt not to dominate and domineer and to be a rapacious, virus-like creature who is willing to screw everybody once in order to make a fortune, instead of going into the world that way, how much better is it to walk into the world thinking, how can I benefit others? And in this reputation that I cultivate, I think I can assemble more teamwork around me. I can create an opportunity for me to benefit from things that people don't have to tell me but decide to share, numbers that people are suspicious of, and so they fill me in before a meeting and so on. I'm dancing a little bit around the subject. Am I answering your question?
I think you partially did, Neal. But very interesting topic. Let me follow up on this one, because you said that you can create more synergies, more collaboration if
Teamwork.
Teamwork, exactly. But if you look at the culture of success that we live in, many will come and tell you, well, whatever, right? Create all the kindness and kumbaya that you want, but this is not successful, right? What is successful is to be cutthroat, and obviously, I'm trying to picture the case here.
No, right.
And get your profits at all costs. What do you tell to people that tells you you can do whatever you want with this, Neal? I just want to be successful.
Well, I think that there's how you define success obviously affects that. And I do understand what you're saying is that there is evidence to suggest that a virus-like approach to everything, you win in the end because you're the only person left standing. But I would ask you does Elon Musk look happy to you? Does he ever look happy? Or is he perpetually aggrieved, upset about everything, suspicious of everyone, and feeling like he's the only one in the world that gets it? His money has not turned him into a happy person. And he has left behind him a trail of devastation and ill repute, where I have known people who have personally interviewed for jobs with him, and they say there is a darkness around that man that reduces the temperature in a room every time he walks in. Now, is this how you define success? You can have all the riches in the world and people cringe on your approach? Or I would look at what's happened to the head of United Healthcare in New York City, gunned down, only to find that people, a large portion of the population, meets that murder with a kind of glee. Is this how you want to be known? Is that success to you? I mean, I have a feeling it's percolating. I don't know if it's in the world, but it is in the United States. I have a feeling that people are prepared now to look the other way when a bus is about to hit you, when you're the leader of a company famous for its ill intent. There's a vibration, if you will, that I don't think has come to full flower. And I would ask everybody to think of, do we remember what happened in the French Revolution? Everything was fine until it wasn't. And there was a moment like Egyptian Spring or they say that you cannot time the market, that you never know quite when stocks are going to take a big plunge. The conditions are all there, but all of a sudden things go down. Or what they would say about the Russian Revolution, nothing happens for years, and then years happen in weeks. And I believe we are approaching a precipice of frustration and anger over the idea that success is the result of a pirate-like, uncaring attitude towards our fellow humans. And I think that's going to go out of style in a violent way.
Neal, not everything is lost because you obviously are a very successful executive, and you carry the banner of kindness and respect. When you were at Saatchi and Saatchi, and you were the worldwide director of creative learning, such an interesting title.
Right.
How do you teach creativity at scale? What were your principles? And how did you success so much by teaching creativity, which is something that somewhat is counterintuitive because people think that being creative has to be something natural that is innate to you, that you're born with. How do you
Well,
teach creativity?
I should correct the impression a little bit. My what I would teach was not the art of creativity or how to amplify that, but rather how to sell your ideas, because even a brilliant idea is of no value if you can't get it made or can't get it advanced. And so there's a kind of a quality that human beings have, which is that they don't know a good idea when they see it the first time. And the evidence I would use for this is if everybody knew a good idea when they heard it or saw it, then everybody would be running a movie studio or picking hit records, because we would see something on first blush that it takes other people a while to get used to. The idea, an idea in script form or off a description is often difficult to perceive the merits of it. So what would happen is very creative people at Saatchi would sometimes find that their best work was difficult to get produced. So my role was to help them paint a picture of it and present it and create an enthralling story around it enough so that people would go, oh, I really like that. Because I'd seen in my time sort of mediocre ideas find their way to the top because people so readily understood them, as opposed to the more interesting ideas, which it takes some getting used to. So I'll give you an example of the sort of approach we used to take that was counterintuitive, but this often worked. When there was a kind of law of the universe that people form their opinions of you from small things, and that how you do anything is how you do everything. For example, when you walk into a business meeting, if you're quite well put together, you're well groomed, you look sharp, you look rested, your clothing is immaculate, people form an impression of you that you are businesslike and professional. Just off the first visual. If you smell good and so forth, well, it feels like you know what you're doing. If you speak well, if you are carefully prepared, well, they assume that your financials are good. And these are unfair assumptions, but they are the sorts of assumptions people make. How you do anything is how you do everything. So what we used to do is say, when they walk in that room, you have two goals. The first is to make sure that they really enjoy themselves. And the second is that needs to be the best meeting of the week for them. Those are your goals. It isn't enough to have a brilliant idea. I need for them to walk out of that room with the impression that they will always enjoy your company. I want them to feel like they owe you one if they didn't approve what you asked them to approve. You need to create a kind of an economy where if they said no, they feel bad about it. So the way that you might do it is, as soon as they walk into the room, it smells good. It smells like vanilla or roses or coffee or cookies. It's warm, but not in an unpleasantly warm way. I just mean that it isn't cold. It sounds interesting. It sounds fun in there. There's music playing when they come in. Or have you ever been to Cirque du Soleil, Santiago?
I've been, yes.
Okay. Which show did you see in particular?
There've been a couple of them. I think I saw one called Alegria or something like that.
You'll notice that that in the permanent installations, like in Las Vegas, they have a lot of these Cirque du Soleil shows, and they have these beautiful theaters, gorgeous theaters. When you walk in, you don't walk into an empty room that is where there's nothing happening. There's a soundtrack playing, and it will have, say, for example, the sound of a river or birds, or it will have a light sort of droning music to it that creates a mood and that matches the lighting. So we would do the same thing. You would walk in to an on-theme sound, a musical soundtrack. It would be to set a mood, to set an expectation. There would be special lighting. There would be visuals placed around the room that were very interesting and seemed to tell a story, but you're not quite sure what the story is. It has a kind of vibe to it. And then, instead of getting up and reviewing an agenda off of bullet points on a slide, the person that would introduce the meeting would begin with a story. And the story was a fascinating point. It would resolve in an insight. And then the insight would be the theme of the day. This is what's going to trigger a customer response when they see your communication. This is the part of the human instinct and experience that we're going to trigger or remind them of, and all of which is going to lead to your brand uniquely is going to be perceived as recognizing the customer. I see you. I appreciate you. Every ad needs to be a love letter to the customer. The meeting itself is a love letter to the client. It's saying, I care enough about you to have really prepared for this meeting. It will be the best meeting you have all week, and I do so out of affection, not because I'm trying to sell you something, but because I'm trying to build a relationship where you are always happy to see me. So all of these things add up to a level of inclination on the part of the client. They kind of want to approve whatever you've brought. They feel obliged to. There's a kind of rule of reciprocity, which is if they've taken this much pain to make sure that I enjoy myself and that it presents the work in the best possible light, I feel confident that when it meets its final execution, it will be a very high quality piece of work. So this is the kind of way that you build a relationship and put work in front of people and sell it creatively with a kind of humanity that's very attractive. Oftentimes people don't know why they feel like they owe you something, but they do. You know, we're taking advantage of human instincts and the human desire for connection and camaraderie. And not every meeting should feel like a battle. You know, not every meeting should feel as though I feel like I just got my pocket picked. Have you noticed that oftentimes people will emerge from a meeting and they'll say, we won? And the way they say it, they mean the other side lost. That was never our attitude. That's not how you build relationships. You don't build relationships by riding right up to the ragged edge of a contract and insisting on every nickel and every dime and every penny. You build a relationship through the elasticity of, let me do you a favor and I'll pretend I didn't see that and so forth.
You gave a TED Talk called The ROI of Kindness. Love the title. Can you take us through the business case?
Yeah, so I'll give you a specific example from my own experience where car dealers in the United States have rather bad reputation of being sort of cutthroat thieves. And the incentives of the business align with a dealer lying to you. In other words, when you walk in, they're rarely going to tell you the truth because it doesn't pay to tell you the truth. They're trying to get as much money out of you as they possibly can. And if they have to lie for 3 hours, the incentives seem to support the idea that they would do that. But the best ones, the ones that make fortunes, are the ones that are the outliers who say, I'm not going to participate in that. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to create a reputation in the marketplace of a sort of sweetness. I'm going to be, when everybody else is going to zig, when they're going to make it almost impossible to enjoy the process of buying a car, I'm going to make it fun. So what this guy used to do is he had a kind of unofficial slogan, which was, I'll lose a little money to make a friend. And he would say, for example, to his service writers, listen, if an older woman comes in here and she doesn't look like she's made of money, I want you to do me a favor. If it's anything less than $200 US, just give it to her. Just do the service for free. But don't tell her it's from me, and don't tell her it's the policy. Tell her it's from you. I want her to think she's got a guy in the car business. I want her to think she's got somebody looking out for her. And you know why I'm willing to lose that $200? Because when she goes home, she's not going to shut up about it to her son or her daughter or at the tennis club. She's going to talk about it for months. And that's $200 in advertising expenditure that I am perfectly willing to pay. And you know what else? She's going to come back to me, and you're going to love to see her coming because you know she thinks you're the cat's pajamas. You can say, listen, Mrs. Hutchin-Curtis, I can't do it every time for obvious reasons, but, you know, I just like you. And so when it's not too much, we'll watch out for each other. Okay. That would be one example of what he would do. It's really a marketing investment, but it comes off like he's being super generous. Then another example would be on the New Jersey Turnpike, where he had his dealership. Oftentimes people will get cracks in their windshield because in the winter, they put down a lot of road salt and a lot of debris in order to create traction. Well, come spring, when everything thaws out, all those little rocks go off the back end of trucks into people's windshields, and everybody's driving around with a little crack in their windshield. So what he would do is when you would pull into his lot, he would send somebody out to fix it, and he wouldn't tell you. He would just do it. Wouldn't charge you, wouldn't tell you. And it developed this kind of strange urban myth that if you went into his dealership, automatically your windshield would drive away with no cracks in it. And I said, you know, it strikes me as kind of odd that you wouldn't tell them. Why wouldn't you tell them? And he goes, because it's more fun if they think there's a sort of elf going around fixing them, you know, a sort of guardian angel doing it for nothing. And it, in a way, it cultivates the impression that I'm a sort of sucker, that people are driving in with no other intention than to get their windshield fixed for free. And I am perfectly willing to sustain this image of me as a sucker. Can you imagine how valuable that is to me when people think they can come to me as a car dealer and fleece me? That's very valuable as a reputation in the car business. And another example would be he made it a policy who said, listen, and this is to his sales staff, I don't want anybody staying here for more than 3 hours. If you can't get them out of here in a new car in less than 3 hours, brother, you're just pissing people off. And I don't want to piss people off. If you have to lose $500 on the sale of a Camry, just get them out of here in 2 or 3 hours. Why am I willing to lose that money? Because when you're like that, when you're nice to people that way, when you're not grinding them all day, they come back to you for service. And everybody knows that's where a dealer makes his money. Dealer makes his money on service. We make thousands on service. I'm only going to make $500 on that car anyway over sticker. Forget it. No. Be good to people. They'll come back to you. And he grew his service base. I think he started with 60 service bays, and by the time I left, I think he had something like 98. Do you know how much money he's coining? And I'll give you another example of the sort of ROI of kindness. Now, he had a very famous, I shouldn't say famous, it was local, but it was a radio campaign where he was advertising the service of his stores, you know, the mechanics and so forth. But instead of talking to the consumer, instead of talking to customers about we have the best service here, he advertised for mechanics. He would put an ad on the regular radio that would say, are you one of the best mechanics in the state of Pennsylvania? If you're in the top 3%, I want you to call me personally because I love great mechanics and I will pay top dollar for the best there is because great mechanics make people happy. And I love that. So I want to make you happy. I have a warm place in the winter and it's cool here in the summer. You can eat off the floors. I use nothing but Snap-on tools. In the States, Snap-on tools are really deluxe. And he goes, you work for me for 3 years, brother, I'll give you those tools, which is worth thousands. And then he says, so you call me on this number, and he really did have this number. If you called that number, you really did get him. And he said, call me on this number. I want to talk to you. And, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So what happened was there were sort of 4 dividends. The first is that people stopped arguing about how much the service cost because they're going, you got to pay for the best, right? The best costs money. The second thing was he got a reputation for quick turnaround because good mechanics are faster. And then the third thing, and that wound up actually being less expensive because a quick repair costs less than a long repair. Then he was getting a lot of people, and his own staff started coming to him and saying, listen, I'm a little spooked that I'm not in the top 3%. And he would go, well, I've got good news for you because the region doesn't charge me to get you coached up on the new technology. You just tell me what you want to work on and what you want to get better at. I'll send you to the region. And yeah, I lose you for a couple of days, but when you come back, you're the best in the state. So if you want to get better, I'll get you better. So his mechanics all started to get really good. They were the number 1 in the state. Then, and this was my favorite thing, his service manager comes to him one day and he says, hey, guess how many shirts the boys normally buy for, the mechanic shirts. He goes, I don't know, 3? And he goes, yeah, exactly. 1 to wear, 1 for the locker, 1 in the laundry. Guess how many shirts your guys buy? I don't know, 6. You know why? Because 3 of those shirts stay at home. They're wearing them out to dinner with their families. They want people to see where they work. Now that, to me, that kind of pride means that his staff loves working there, loves for everybody to know that. And all those mechanics out there in the world wearing those shirts, again, it's marketing. It's free advertising. That kind of pride in somebody, that's like a Yelp, that's like a very good review online. And by the way, the children, people would come up to them in restaurants and they would see that their people are going up to their dad and going, oh, you must be one of the best mechanics in Pennsylvania. He's going, yeah, you're damn right I am. And the kids are seeing that in their father. And so you can imagine this cycle of gold this creates. And that's an indication of the ROI in more than financial terms, although there was plenty when it came to the financial.
Mm-hmm.
But the ROI was, this is an environment, a culture where we take pride in our work around here, where we don't cheat people, where it's about quality and getting better and personal development. And very, very few of his mechanics ever left that I was aware of. So I've got more examples, but that's one.
Neal, that's a beautiful couple of stories. I'm just thinking out loud and telling you, if you go with such pitch, the ROI of kindness to a board, to a company, mid-size, let alone corporations.
Yeah.
I have a lot of doubts that, first of all, you get any uptime with the board members. And second, I think it'll be a very short-lived pitch.
Well, maybe. In short-sighted companies, yeah, they won't.
Yeah. What's going on with corporate and with businesses in general? Why? And you use a keyword here, short-sighted.
Yeah.
We live in the short-termism, right? Everything is next quarter. What's going on? And what can we do to change that? Because I'll tell you one more thing, right? One of the reasons people say these days that working sucks, it's because there's no kindness.
Yes.
And you said before that you feel like you've been robbed after a meeting or something like that. Sometimes, most of the times, you feel like you've been punched in the face, in the nose, after a meeting or after your whole day of meetings, one after the other of punches. How do we convince leadership that kindness, humanity, and being kind, it's good and needs to go back to trend?
Well, let's take the example of Toyota. That is a very large company. That's one of what they call a zaibatsu. It is a company that is so interconnected with its suppliers and its customers that it's actually a kind of living organism that goes beyond the borders of its corporate footprint. And they have a kind of policy, or at least they have since the 30s, that was to look 70 years over the horizon. And that's what led them largely to put so much money and attention into hybrid technologies, which, if you look around you right now, that seemed like a pretty good bet. They didn't get early to electric vehicles, but they certainly have. They've really made a name out of their hybrid technologies. It's because they were so sort of looking over the horizon. Now, one of the things that they do is wherever they are, at least in the United States, their factories are sort of famous for being a good corporate citizen wherever they are. An example would be, say, they open a truck factory in San Antonio, Texas. Well, San Antonio has to be very careful about its water table. It's one of these places where it relies, the whole city relies on the water staying at a certain level. And you got to be careful about drought years and so on. Well, a factory uses a lot of water. So what Toyota does is it goes, we cannot afford to be known in this city for screwing with their water supply. Therefore, two things. We have to be very careful about recycling, and second, we have to be very careful about filtration. The water that leaves that factory and goes back into the water table is cleaner than the water that went in. That is a very typical Toyota move, is to make sure that we are absolutely blameless when it comes to any problems about the infrastructure of the town. There's another thing that they're quite famous for, which is they'll roll into Blue Springs, Mississippi, and the first thing they will do is set up a scholarship fund for all the local high schools. So they'll make it possible for students to get the best possible education in Blue Springs. They want people showing up there just to educate their kids. And as it happens, that brings the best kind of worker into the factory environment, right? Because smart people know to go there. So they rely on a good corporate citizen behavior in order to attract a certain kind of attention. Now, you're thinking, is that really worth the investment? Well, when they have a recall, as an example, every car company is going to have a recall eventually. It's just cars are complicated. And Toyota had a recall in 2009, I think, in the United States. The largest selling car at the time was the Toyota Camry. It was accused of unintended acceleration, which turned out to be mostly people just mistaking the gas pedal for the brake. They thought they were stepping on the brake, but they were really stepping on the gas. Somehow this is Toyota's fault. But Toyota understood that you will never persuade people that this is their fault. And therefore, they mounted a recall. But they were so good about it. They treated their dealers so well about it. They didn't go with a big campaign of delay and obfuscation and lying. And, they didn't try to put it off. They didn't go to war with their customers. Instead, they said, the faster we get this problem behind us, the faster we'll make money again. So immediately they mounted a recall, a really good one, a solid one that was built on a playbook that they had written 50 years before. All they had to do was they plugged in the circumstances and out comes recall plan T. Page 1, you do this. They prepared for this moment. And to cut a long story short, when they got to the end of the recall, when they finally had repaired all the cars with the, making the gas pedal and brake a little further apart and so forth, when they got to the end of that, the customer satisfaction ratings were higher off the people whose cars had been recalled than they were going in. In other words, they came out of the recall with higher dealer satisfaction. The dealers were happier with the company than they were before the recall, and the customers were happier with the company than before the recall. Ultimately, what that means is, if you are one of those people that had a Toyota Camry, and this is how they act when they've made a mistake, I am never buying another car except a Toyota Camry for the rest of my life. And over the midterm and the long term, that does very, very good things. People know that in the end, that's the last battleship to sink.
You have bent the rules of social media and society because, Neal, you have a follower base of almost 500,000 people that started following you on short videos about kindness. The reason I'm saying you bending the rules is because social media is designed for rage, for drama, for clickbaiting. That's the source, right?
Yeah.
How did you do that? Why? And it's really nice because it gives you a lot of hope to people that think, oh, I'm too kind. People that this. I'll tell you what happens to this, right? The common wisdom you hear about kind people. Oh, kind of people is always taken for granted. They will never take him for promotions. They are somewhat abused by others because they are too kind. 500,000 people follows you on kindness.
Well, you're absolutely right that the incentives aligned with the algorithms are that rage baiting, division, this causes engagement. And the platform incentive is to keep you engaged. So it keeps you fearful, and it so that you're always returning for more updates on whether the danger has increased or lightened. It keeps you angry, because when you're angry, you go down the rabbit hole and you want to learn more about, there's a phrase they use in the United States. Republicans, they call it owning the libs. Have you ever heard that phrase? What it symbolizes is they would be willing to cut off their own nose if it made liberals angry. And there's a whole cottage industry of making people angry at the other political end of the spectrum in order to keep them engaged. There's an old Bertolt Brecht poem. It goes, I've got it right here. All the gang who rule us hope our quarrels never stop. It helps them split and fool us so they remain on top. And this is the use of social media's algorithm, is it is meant to, I'm not sure that they started out this way, but the algorithm favors rage baiting and strife and fear mongering. So I cannot say that I entered the space, the social media space, with the intention of being any kind of antidote towards the rage baiting and anger. But what I found was I was a kind of counter programming. I was a moment of calm. And not everybody, 500,000 in the social media space is really kind of nothing. When you compare it to the real hitters, which are in the multi-millions. But for a certain kind of person, I'm a welcome presence. And it's a little bit like a breath of fresh air, touching grass with your feet. And what I've found is that even though I'm not hugely popular, I'm not a famous figure, I find friends everywhere. Like, I will get just the loveliest emails from people in strange corners of the earth, from Ireland and Canada and New Zealand and Australia, the English-speaking world, where they'll say, if you're ever in Auckland, I'd love to buy you a cup of coffee. And I would get that all the time, especially strangely in Ohio, in the United States. I'm sort of jazz famous in Ohio, where, by the way, I love this term, jazz famous. It means you'll never be recognized on the street, but for people who know who you are, they think you're a celebrity. So I find myself welcome in the strangest corners. So I'm not really answering your question, but I do believe that there is room for everyone on the internet, and not everything has to be about anger. And what's more, and this is my favorite part of it, Santiago, it's a lot of brands will reach out to me for their company meetings because they want to increase the sensibility inside the building that our culture isn't about conflict and trying to kill each other on our way to the top, that it's not all Hunger Games. And have you ever noticed this phenomenon? Okay, so you've got a company and it has people that are just starting, the sort of young people, and then you've got the people at the top, the new management, the new CEO, maybe the new CFO. They tend to agree on the values of the company. The top person's trying to get a vision across of a place that's of a culture that's positive and upbeat, where we aren't scared to look out for each other. And of course, all the young people want to do that. They want to be fair. They want to support each other and so forth. And then you get this very cynical middle where they say, yeah, I know what the CEO's telling you, but that's not how it works around here. And what they bring me in to do is to try to talk to that middle group and say, it's not as bad as you think. You don't have to be an a-hole to get ahead here. And what you'll find again and again, and you'll see this in the military, officers who really do care about their men, they wind up advancing because their people will do anything for them. They'll go into harm's way for somebody who isn't. Beloved leaders in the military are actually quite common. In spite of the reputation of military men as being these sort of disagreeable martinets, you know, the reputation of the drill instructor for yelling and screaming and so on. You know, the drill instructors quite frequently have developed an enormous affection for the people that wind up graduating from their course. And they have a lot of latitude for somebody who's trying, who's being sincere. And they have very little patience for a-holes and people who think it's about them and not about the team. You know, you survive in combat together, not because you're Ultraman or Captain America. You know, this reputation of the lone soldier out there on their own, yeah, you don't survive long in the wild any longer than, you know, a single muskox is not going to make it. So I find that the kind of videos that I do are a kind of call in the wild to CEOs who are trying to return their company to a culture of teamwork and cooperation. And if I could just say one last thing about that. Human beings survived on Earth because of our ability to cooperate. That was our great superpower. There's a wonderful remark from the anthropologist, I don't know, it was Margaret Mead. Somebody had asked her, what was the very first sign of civilization? You may have heard of this. And she said, oh, the very first evidence of civilization was a broken femur that we found in old bones that had healed, a broken femur that had healed. Why was that evidence? Because it takes about a year for that femur to heal, which means that for a year, those cavemen were taking care of that person. Somebody who could not defend the tribe, somebody who could not go out and gather, but they took care of them anyway. That's civilization. And, you know, you will find that there's a kind of efficiency to generosity. There's an efficiency of not having to look over your shoulder every 5 minutes or to distrust what other people are telling you. Have you ever heard of the Raid Gaulois? It's kind of an ultra marathon. The Raid Gaulois is a French race where it was incredibly difficult to finish. It would go across terrains and it was done in teams. And the United States would send all these military men to this Raid Gaulois to compete in teams of 5. And many, many times they would not finish. But teams of 5 65-year-old grandmothers would finish. You know why? Because conflict removes your energy. It robs you of your nerve. And groups of older women were very good teammates to one another. So they supported one another the entire race. Did they win? No, but they finished. Whereas these Navy SEALs didn't, because they wanted to win so badly. They started sniping at each other and they were willing to leave people behind. And that's a lesson I think all corporations need to observe, which is, do you want to wind up crossing the finish line all by yourself, leaving behind you the broken bodies of your colleagues? Or do you want all of us to get across this finish line together?
Neal, I have prepared 5 questions here. But the catch is that I want you to answer in less than 30 seconds each one of them.
Okay.
Do you think you can do it?
I'll try. I shall try.
I challenge you.
So yeah, that
Number
is a
1.
challenge, but I will try.
Número 1. One story that changed the way you see people in one sentence.
My father and I had an experience where we broke down in the California Central Valley, and the amount of generosity that came at us from people who expected no payment to help us was extraordinary. When the country was basically in constant strife, I was reminded how kind people can be. They're real people.
Number 2. The most overused word in business communications right now.
Wow, there are a few. Synergy is one. I'll just go with that. Although it's not the one that makes me the most angry. The one that makes me most angry is be practical, or be do you know what I mean? They like be realistic. That's it. Be realistic.
Number 3. You're having a tough conversation with someone and you can only pick one of these 2. Kindness or honesty.
Oh, honesty.
When was the last time you changed your mind completely because of a story someone told you?
Well, that's really hard to answer. Let me put it this way. When somebody revealed their father had died, and that had really destroyed them, and the story was just about some old memory they'd had with their father. And in that short story, I saw them as a human being instead of a competitor. And that, you could say, was to change my mind.
And number 5, what is the one thing you want every person listening to this right now to do differently starting tomorrow?
If I could lay down an edict, it would be just reflect on the fact that we go so much further together, and not everyone is out to get you. That's a poor answer in spirit. It would take me a while to rev up and really make that make sense. Let me put it this way. There's a wonderful quote from Voltaire, which is, "Life is a shipwreck, but we must remember to sing in the lifeboats." And it's not everything is a disaster.
Neal, let's wrap this up.
I feel like I
I'm
let
sure
you down on those answers, Santiago.
No, you didn't. You didn't. I was actually thinking about this last sentence you said in the quote from Voltaire. How can people find you? How can people know more about your kindness? How can people read you? How can people engage with you?
I'm easy to find because I spell my name strangely. It's not complex. It's Neal Foard, but it's unique to me. Nobody on earth spells their name that way. So if you just type it in right, you can find me everywhere on TikTok and YouTube and LinkedIn and Instagram, and then my email is neal@storyfire.net, and that's my company, Storyfire, and where I help train executives to tell better stories in order to communicate their agenda more effectively and in a way that connects more emotionally. So storyfire.net. And there you go.
Neal, I want to thank you for your contagious kindness and energy. I feel super positive after this conversation. And I'm taking a couple of things away that if you may, I will tell you right now. The first one is that kindness is a long-term ROI, right? And no matter what, it seems that we always, after crisis or peaks or stages of humanity where values are under fire, as it is right now, it seems to be right now, we always resort back to humanity and to kindness. And unfortunately, sometimes it's because of a tragedy or a revolution, as you pointed out at the beginning, or some tough times. But I think that we can be kind to each other and human to each other without waiting for something bad to happen. So I want to start practicing right now. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your time today.
Thank you, Santiago. You're delightful to speak with.
I have assessed over 500 executives on their productivity, and the top 10 all have something in common. They score high across 4 specific vectors: efficiency, effectiveness, ownership, and well-being. When these 4 align, you just don't lead better. You create compounding advantages that separate exceptional leaders from good ones. Take my 5-minute free assessment, and you will see exactly how you compare. Most leaders are shocked by what they discover. Find out where you stand at the link below. Thanks for listening to Productivi-Tree. I hope you found something useful in today's episode. If you did, and it helps improve your life even a tiny bit, that'll make me really happy. Remember, you can find Productivi-Tree on all major podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. If you enjoyed the show, why not share it with a friend who might also find it helpful? Until next time, and keep growing and stay productive.